CTN. I'm your host, Robert Van Sluten. This episode, we're going to dig into the build system a little bit. Let's get started. Sometimes it's a good idea to back away from application design and UI kit classes and focus on Xcode, the software development environment. There's a lot to it, there's a lot of complexity, and there's quite a bit of flexibility. Let's explore a little bit of that related to building projects. So far, we've just simply used the arrow button to do build and run. Fundamental question would be, well, what if I just want to build, or what if I just want to run? Can I do that separately? There is a product menu, and I could say build for running. That'll just simply do a build, do a run, and there's a run. Now I could potentially stop through the menu, or I could use the button. And I could just turn around and run again after I've searched through some code and I want to run the test or whatever it was I was looking at again. Now, the build process is complex. .ems are compiled, and what happens is what is referred to as an incremental build, where decisions are made based on dependencies and timestamps. Obviously, if a .em has been modified, it needs to be rebuilt, compiled and linked into the final product. .ems, though, are also dependent on header files, and those header files are dependent on other header files. And in fact, most of what the compiler sees is header files as a result of those dependencies. Those header files may have also been modified. They're time-stamped also. Some header file way up the chain may have been modified, and as a result, the .em has to be recompiled. This process is dependable, it is effective. However, if you want to actually do a clean build, you can do that too. Okay, we clean test succeeded, and then we can go ahead and do our build. Build for running. Now, I've mentioned this header file dependency issue. Let's dig into that deeper, because there's been some changes and it's a little different than what you may have learned in your previous C courses or whatever. The project I've been building and running is simply just called test, and what it is just a single window application, no modifications. We're currently looking at the viewcontroller.h file, and you'll see your standard import of the UI kit header file. Now, just a little bit of history. There used to be a #include, which is still usable, but it doesn't take into account whether the header has already been included up the chain by another header. And that would create redefinition problems. And the way that was dealt with is people would if-def around the include to check to see whether the header had already been included. It was a major pain. #import actually takes care of that problem. However, you would still say, well, okay, fine. Every .m usually includes some major system things, UI kit or foundation. doesn't that cause a lot of recompiling of the same thing over and over again? And yes, that would be the case. One way of approaching that issue is the concept of pre-compiled headers. And if you take a look in supporting files, there's a file called, well, in this case, test prefix.pch for precompiled header. If you look in there, you'll see UIKit and Foundation is listed. And those are pre-compiled headers, which reduce the amount of build time. This file is actually implicitly included in every .m. So that helps the situation. That said, in iOS 7 and Xcode 5, they've taken that a step further in something referred to as modules. And we'll go to the next slide and start looking at that. Okay, if you go to the project and you select Build Settings, choose All, get more information than you do from Basic. Don't worry about Combined and Levels, just pick Combined. If you scroll down and you find Apple LLVM 5.0 language modules. Now, LLVM 5.0 is the compiler. It's the version of the compiler that's used. There is yes/no settings here. Enable modules, C and Objective-C, and link frameworks automatically. Yes. Now what's going on here is Apple's created a mechanism where the header files and object modules are combined together into a thing referred to as a module. So you no longer have this import process, or effectively include process, that's going on. Basically, it's one step beyond pre-compiled headers. It improves efficiency, and it also eliminates some possible name collisions that you could end up with in certain circumstances. This is turned on by default, and there isn't really a reason to turn it off. Let's go to the next slide and talk about what actually goes on in the .m and .h's. Okay, I jumped back to the viewcontroller.h file and I modified it. I took out the import UIKit, UIKit.h, and I replaced it with a Objective-C directive @import UIKit. What this says is use the module UIKit. Now, in actuality, because modules were turned on in the build settings, this is doing exactly the same thing the import would do. Xcode is automatically replacing the import with an @import UIKit. So the bottom line is we've already been using modules, not precompiled headers, already without even knowing it. Now, why do you care about all this? I will say that it's generally important to have a decent understanding of the underlying mechanisms of what you're creating. And the other thing is, it's the opportunity to dig into another part of the Xcode environment. For example, build settings. Thanks for watching.